Well, at Fukushima Daiichi, the problem was the pumping power stopped. And when the pumping power stopped, water was still getting busted apart. And hydrogen's real light. Even though it wants to get with oxygen again, it will dissociate fairly quickly. And the hydrogen will sit at the top of the vessel, and the oxygen will sit in a layer below it, and then there's the water. The designers of that particular reactor had intentionally designed it so that you would vent the hydrogen outside of the containment building. This has always been kind of controversial. They ducted the hydrogen up to the upper decks of the reactor, which were outside of the containment. There's just kind of a sparse steel frame structure up there. And 1, 2, 3, we saw it happen on the news. First one filled with hydrogen, got to a certain point, boom. The news said, oh, we had a nuclear explosion. I'm like, no, we didn't. It wasn't a nuclear explosion. It was a hydrogen gas explosion. And it didn't burst the containment. I mean, I don't want to diminish it too much, but it was not nearly as scary as it sounded. And it happened 1, 2, 3. The tsunami hit about an hour after the reactors were shut down. So fission was long gone by the time the tsunami came along. But the reactors were still managing decay heat. The tsunami came in and destroyed the diesel generators, but they still had batteries. And those batteries ran for about 8 hours. That 8 hours was the most important time of all. If you had to pick 8 hours to make sure that the pumps were still working, those first 8 hours were the most important time. So by the time the batteries ran dry and the pumps stopped, the reactor had gotten past the worst part of its decay heat come down. But it was still going on. Decay heat doesn't turn off, and it continues even in spent fuel. That decay heat continued to build. Heat was not being removed from the reactor. Why weren't they using the power from the reactor to run the pumps? Because the reactor had been turned off.
It shows if you do stupid designs, something bad will happen even after 40 years. A friend of mine was GE's first nuclear safety engineer, and he worked on the Fukushima plant, and they would have meetings with the TEPCO officials and engineers, and they would all nod their heads in long meetings and say, oh yeah, we'll do this, we'll do that. And then they go off after the meeting and do whatever they wanted. That's why you had a 15-foot seawall with a 45-foot wave coming over, and diesel generators and fuel in the basement. It has nothing to do with nuclear power. It has to do with bad management.
Someday looking at our descendants and to have them say, why did you give us this world that we have now? Why did you give us this world of energy poverty, of pollution, of war, of disease, when you knew there was a better way and you could have made it happen? You say, why didn't you do this? You knew about it and you could have made it happen, but you didn't. What's your excuse?